Hey guys, what is going on, RedMaster, and welcome back to the episode of Cards and Castles, where today we are going to be taking care of that third part in the three-part beginner series that I started quite a while ago. I know I've had quite a gap in between the second and third part, but I did want to finally address that today. And today, that third part will be covering some general match tips and tricks that you guys can use pretty much in any sort of Cards and Castles match, some strategies that I use, and some that I've kind of seen from other players, some common practices and whatnot that I kind of want to share to you guys if you are new and want to improve. These are some of the these are some of the tricks and strategies that you can use, hopefully to advance your way up to or up on the leaderboards. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Yeah, I think I had something else to say, but you know what? Just let's get it started. Alright, so here we go in this opening phase here, or the Mulligan phase as I like to call it, and where do we exactly go from here? So this is, in my honest opinion, a pretty decent and important part in a match. Even if it's just a start and nothing's actually happened on the board yet, it is very important because what you can do here pretty much dictates how the rest of the game might go, whether it's in or against your favor. So we kind of start here with the cards we're looking at. Obviously, I think the game taught you guys a little bit about Mulligan, where you can, of course, replace whatever card you want to in your opening hand in favor of a new one. A quick tip for that, because I don't really think the Mulligan needs that much explaining, other than the fact that normally it's a good idea to replace anything in your hand that's around 4 gold or higher, I would say. You tend to want to grab something within the 1 to 3 gold range, so that way you can start off strong, whether it be with a simple unit or if you want to start going ahead in order to further a deck maybe with a certain play. 1 to 3 gold again is where you want to be within that starting, or at least with the opening hand. That's where you kind of want to be. There are exceptions to this. One, pirates giving you access to more gold on your next turn. So say if I have maybe a merchant's favor and I also have a 4 gold unit, I might consider keeping that 4 gold unit, since turn 3 I can use that merchant's favor to bring out that 4 gold unit. So again, pirates something to consider. And also Medal of Bravery, the card that's given to the turn 2 player, that gives them 1 extra gold for that turn. It's just to gain 1 gold, kind of like a merchant's favor, but without the treasure attached to it. So just a simple gold gain to potentially bring out something bigger early. Be the one to bring out maybe a 4 gold first. With that coin, makes no difference. So that's kind of the quick thing on mulligans, but also here I like to go ahead and check out my opponent's faction. The second big part, I would say, to this opening screen here. And what that kind of tells me, or at least what the faction combinations will tell me, is what I can expect to see from my opponent within the matchup. I think it's a great thing to be able to see your opponent's factions, so that way you can go ahead and plan for what's going to come into the match later on. For example, if your opponent is, say, running Vikings or Crusaders, maybe Vikings, we'll stick to that for now. With Vikings, you can pretty much predict as you go on further into the game and have more cards at your disposal, and you can begin to kind of memorize those cards and be like, alright, if my opponent's running Viking, I could expect to see maybe Chain Lightning from Lightning Blade or Temple, or, maybe some buffs like Ludicrous Strength, or maybe the Rune Warrior. You kind of get the idea there. With the obvious knowledge of faction colors and the cards inside them, and being able to see what exactly your opponent is running in terms of faction combination, you pretty much predict what your opponent could be playing, or what you could be expecting to see from your opponent, and that way you can go ahead and play and plan accordingly. And again, right in the opening hand too, say if you want, oh, my opponent's running Viking Warlock, they might want to rush me, I want to go ahead and find a 2 gold unit. You can go ahead and maybe swap out Blacksmith and Dino Rider in this hand, and in favor of maybe getting something, and again, a cheaper unit. But that's just something that could happen, not necessarily for this scenario. But yeah, faction combination, I would say, fairly important. As you go later on too, I do want to mention, if once you get into round, I say badge 20 maybe and higher, that's when faction combination is going to be really important. That's when you're going to be seeing some of the same decks being played. Just to kind of rank people up. I know some people like to take certain decks that they find pretty powerful, and you'll see some common occurrences between decks. Again, check cards TV. I would say that's a fairly great way to memorize what you could be seeing from your opponent in certain color combinations. Go ahead and pop in the TV. But enough of this opening hand. Enough of this opening area. I think we're pretty clear on what to do here. So let's go ahead and get right into the match itself and get on with some of the in-game strategies. Alrighty, so in this match, I think I'm going to go ahead and swap out Kraxus and Dwarven Scope. I know this is a different hand from the last one, don't worry about it. Nothing too serious. So this is, I think, is a good start for me. Now, right now, well, actually, hold on. Here's the Medal of Bravery. I just realized that now I'm on the red side, so I can show you the guys a glimpse of the Medal of Bravery, just in case you want to know what it looks like. But anyway, right now, here's where we have the option of performing our first turn. Now, normally, if I didn't have this lumberjack, I would pass because it's not really. I would say if your opponent does pass their turn one, it's pretty safe that you can pass your turn one as well. Usually, that's kind of a dead phase. Nothing really too serious happens in these phases except that you might see a potential lumberjack or Salahar rider. So again, nothing too serious there. So I'm gonna go ahead and just quickly end my turn. Alright, so our opponent here is bringing out the Northlands Wolf, even though, yes, it is a bot. And he, I believe, played it. I have to remember this, because sometimes even I don't remember. But normally I think some people like a little bit of, I think this actually helps with explanations, but on the 8, like, I kind of like, or at least some people do. I don't normally name the spaces, but I think in this context, it's better to use them to understand. So, like, this is A1, for example. I believe this is A2, A3, A4, B1, B2. So our opponent did play this on, or play this wolf here on C6, which is a decent play. Normally, most units like to kind of start out here as sort of a normal-ish move, a standard move. I would say it's pretty common. So how am I going to respond? Well, obviously I'm going to throw out my Dwarven Miner to block here, and of course right here now we have the option of summoning a unit. As you can see, our spawn, I think, which was taught in the tutorial as well, our spawn pretty straightforward. Around your castle pretty much is where you get to summon a unit. Now, I will mention, quickly before I do summon out this Dwarven Miner, I'll use him to kind of showcase the fact that you can potentially get spawn blocked in this game. Something that most people don't realize is that if your opponent manages to block off all of these spaces here in some form of another, you will be spawn blocked and you will be unable to play a unit for the rest of the game until one of these spaces gets cleared up. So I think that is pretty important to note, because with buildings, I'll get into those in a minute, but if you potentially block your back here with buildings and your opponent ends up blocking these two spaces, that means you've essentially been spawn blocked, and there is real no way of getting around that. So just kind of want to make that quick note there. Spawn blocking is a potential threat in this game if you guys aren't careful. But, I mean, hopefully, normally spawn blocks are very rare occurrences in general. So I wouldn't be too worried about it if I were you. Alright, but now back to the summoning in hand here. We're going to go ahead and play Dwarven Miner. Normally, I like to use these two spaces, the ones above and below the castle, because those spaces do have the most reach out of the 5 right here. These two, of course, really being interchangeable. Sometimes it's based on preference on where you want to spawn them. There's no significant difference between the upper and the bottom spawns, except for maybe where you want to reach for. So if like if there's an opponent that has a building, say, around here, rather than up here, I think it might be a good idea to summon it. A unit down there if you want to push it. If you want to try to hopefully get rid of the building, you're going to want to summon a unit here. But anyway, I digress. So I'm going to go ahead and summon the Dwarven Miner. And we can see I have some options on where he can be played. Most units, of course, out of the spawn can attack and move in the same turn, except for units that are slow or have some sluggish on them, or that being primarily slower units that have the text slow on them, or range units. They can't attack when they're summoned. They can move, and so can the slow units, but neither of which can attack. So, again, quick mental note there. But anyway, to block the wolf, I don't want him coming in and touching the castle just yet, so I'm going to move him on what I believe is C4. Hopefully I'm right there. Yeah, C, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so C4, where I'm going to kind of place this guy to block the wolf, and we'll see how he responds. Alright, so our opponent does play the Manicore here, so he's got a couple of Spirit Link actions. And don't worry too much about the mechanics that are happening. You'll learn more about them as you go on in this game. Nothing too serious there. But now we're going to essentially talk about some building placements, where essentially it is pretty strong to place buildings. I noticed that, I noticed this a lot too. Sometimes people kind of misplace their buildings, and it kind of ends up costing them, or they do play them in a decent spot, but sometimes it gets the better of them. So I do want to take a moment to quickly talk about building spawns. Now, I'm going to go ahead and play this Lumberjack for demonstration. Going to kind of put him out there. And with buildings, I believe yes, okay, they can be played next to any other unit, but cannot move. Kind of straightforward there. It's a building, it's not going anywhere. So, for example, if I want to play the Rat Hovel, I have the option of playing it around the Dwarven Miner here, around the castle, or around the Lumberjack. You'll notice that there are a lot of white spaces that might not make sense, for obvious reasons. They're kind of scattered right here. But as a quick sort of mention, I will, if you could see, I believe around the Dwarven Miner, at B4, at C, what is that, 3? Yeah, C3, C6, and below, which would be D4, I believe. Yeah, D4. That little like area around the Dwarven Miners where I could place this building if I wanted to. Same with the Lumberjack, except you know, different kind of numbers there, different kind of positions. So if I want to use the Rat Hovel, I would probably place it close to the Lumberjack, because obviously not a good idea to place it around the Dwarven Miner right now. It could get easily hit. But I like to place, at least, I guess for the spawners really, I like to place them right around here at E2. And with most buildings, sometimes like the Armory or School of Knowledge, I'll place them around E1 or A1. These kind of back areas here, mostly because I know that they're going to be pretty protected. The opponent's going to have a hard time reaching them if I place them back here. So that's kind of what I want to go for here. So anyway, I'm going to continue my turn. Obviously, the Rat Hovel building is going to go down here, because I feel like with the spawn, well, okay, I'll mention something about the spawners real quick, but I'm just going to go ahead and complete my turn anyway. Going to hit the Lumberjack, do that, and do that. I'll be right back to talk about this sort of building placement. Alrighty here, so we've returned. Our opponent has played a scout right on C6. Hello, I'm blind. But now I also have a rat on the same space that I previously had the Lumberjack, and now why is that? Well, obviously that means, the spawner itself here, or the rat-infested hovel, as I should probably be calling it, is considered a spawner building. It has the ability to summon a rat. There's only 2 spawner buildings in this game, the second being the Unholy Altar in the Warlock faction. As a quick note here, they do differ from regular buildings in which they bring out units every turn, or every, start of the turn, depending on the card. But normally with spawners, I want to kind of make a quick differentiation between these and regular buildings. I like to place, personally, I find the best place for spawners to be around E2, or if I want to get aggressive with it, E3. A1 and A2 appear as well. Mainly because of where the where the units are summoned. Usually, if I have the hovel here, the unit will be summoned right around here. If I had the hovel somewhere around B2, or no, B1, however, the unit would be summoned below. So that is kind of something to just kind of quickly note with spawners. If they are placed in a spot where they don't, or at least with the spawns, if the spawner cannot generate a unit directly below the spawner, it will look above and then of course spawn there. So kind of why I place the hovel here. It has no place to look below to summon a unit, so it ends up spawning it right here. And of course, look at that reach. I could block the scout. I can go ahead and be aggressive with this rat and shoot it all the way forward if I wanted to, but I have other plans for this turn. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and place down this School of Knowledge, another building card, which I'm going to place behind the hovel at E1. Again, I feel like in this spot particularly, same with A1, the buildings are pretty protected and pretty safe, except for maybe Warlock burn damage. They can snipe off any sort of target on the board directly from their hands. So things like Defective Flame Cannon, Blue Firebolt can hurt them. Or if they have maybe Chain and I connect all my units together, most buildings get taken out with a Lightning Blade Chain. Because they are forced to kind of be right next to something if they want to be summoned. So, yeah, quick differentiation between the spawners and regular buildings like the School of Knowledge. All right, and just quickly before I move on, because I feel like this might be pretty similar to how these buildings work here. The same rule can be applied with support units, such as blacksmith right here. Usually, these guys are tend to be kept in the back of the board, mainly because we don't want to lose their effect. So things like blacksmith, for instance, I can go ahead and move back here and feel pretty protected. So again, they're different in which case they can move around and probably dodge whatever the enemy might want to throw at you. But just as a little extra tidbit to the buildings here, because most people kind of think that support units and buildings kind of fall in the same role of you want to keep them alive. So where do you want to place them? I would recommend to keeping these units like Blacksmith and Bard more in the back, so that way you can get some full utilization out of their abilities. All right, so just gonna want to bring us to this point in the game, just to point out something. And I'm kind of you'll probably be seeing a lot of cuts in this game, and maybe an additional one. I'm not sure how this is gonna play out exactly, but I will be jumping around the games just to kind of bring up certain points that I kind of see fit. Right here is a good example of what not to do with your range units. Now, normally with range units, they can't retaliate, as I'm going to demonstrate right now with this rat. If I go ahead, bop it, my rat doesn't die. It doesn't take any sort of damage from this range unit. So something with range units I do want to mention, if you are intending to use them, be sure to keep them safe. Normally don't push them up this far, because they will be able to, of course, go ahead and just be lunged out and killed by what your opponent can spawn. So again, something to just kind of take notice of there. Obviously, it's a CPU player, and that's not really not everyone's going to do that. But I feel like that's again an important point to mention as we're moving on. All right, so here's a good point to look at. What is better in terms of trading? Now, sometimes I do see some mistakes from players making questionable decisions on what can trade into where. Like, for example, if I've seen plays where in this scenario, people will, of course, lose the Elvish Thief. They'll trade that into the Barbarian and then block with the Rat. That isn't necessarily the smartest thing to do here in this situation. Normally, uh, when you when you're considering trading a unit, um, there are a couple things to consider. How does it benefit you, and will it be enough to kind of is it going to be worth it for you in the end? Normally, if I were to, if I was in a real match, well, I'm in a match, but if I was going up against a player right now, I wouldn't say that I would take that trade. I would not want to lose my Elvish Thief into the Barbarian, especially because I have the Rat obviously on the board. So I do see people again do that sometimes. They'll sack whatever unit's closer and kind of continue on, but that isn't necessarily true. You don't have to make those kind of trades. For instance, in this situation, I would go ahead, use my rat here, get rid of the barbarian. I would slap the Elvish Thief onto the castle. Got starting to get some damage going on here. And then I would block using the Dino Rider, perhaps. I don't know if I can go ahead and kill this thing right away, but I don't think I can. So I'm going to go ahead and put the Dino Rider right here. And it's important to realize that I did place it right here, mainly because this unit has flying, the Griffin right here, so it can go ahead. If I were to play a unit on, say, C4, the Griffin would be able to fly right over my Dino Rider, land on C3, and have the option of hitting either my castle or my Dino Rider. So, if you are dealing with flying units, be sure to keep your units closer to the castle to avoid any sort of flying shenanigans. I would say that's a good thing. And if you want, like I'm gonna do here, if you want to push extra units, normally like some people go ahead and throw out a double body block, but that wouldn't necessarily be great because chain does exist and things like that. So if you're playing additional units like this, for instance, I like to play them normally around A4 or E4. That's more of a personal preference. You'll see sometimes players go ahead and be risky and go right for like B5 or D5 if they want to get aggressive, because that way they would be put in sort of castle hitting range. So again, a point to note there for sure. Alright, so here's a point where I can go ahead and go over proper times to push. And by that I mean when's a good time to really start putting the pressure on your opponent, when can you start moving in for some castle damage. Now here's a good scenario where that is possible. I have units on the board currently while my opponent doesn't have much out. He's also got a few resources in his hand, so that's a perfect time to push. I'm going to go ahead, put my units around this area, around around B5 or D5, I would say, are good places to put units if you want to get aggressive, because they can, of course, reach 2 potential hitting points on the castle, or your opponent's castle. Normally, C7 and D8, I believe, are good points to where you can hit your opponent's castle. So here, for instance, right here, if I wanted to, I could go ahead. Well, it's actually better for me. No, I can go ahead, probably place down this. Go ahead, and of course you see I could hit my opponent right here. I could hit my opponent right here as well. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. And I don't think I'm gonna, no, I didn't end the game yet, but I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Just to kind of show you guys when's the proper time to push damage. I feel like a lot of people sometimes miss opportunities for where they are allowed to push damage. They'll go ahead, play a different unit, I would say, or a different card, or maybe not really know where to place the units in terms of positioning and pushing. So something I just want to, again, make a quick note of. Alright folks, with that being said, we are going to wrap it up for a video here. I know there isn't a lot that I covered in this video personally, but that's because a lot of the tips and tricks, you know, this is kind of like the general stuff, the bare bones, if you will, and not really a lot that I can kind of go super in depth with, because also a lot of matches you have to imagine requires some kind of variable happening that I can't really sit here and talk about, because there are so many different things that can happen inside of a match that I can't really possibly prepare you for everything that is to come in this game simply in one video. So I tried to go over the sort of the bare bones things, the things that are generally agreed upon inside the community, inside the game, on what you might need as an overall just match tip or a trick or a strategy to kind of bring you that little extra step of the way forward to the top, I guess you can probably say that. And again, people do have their own opinions on what they use as a valid strategy or a valid tip. Some people might disagree with some things that I said here, and that's okay. If you guys are one of my veterans watching, be sure to leave a comment down below if you have a tip or trick in matches for newer players or struggling players. Be sure to leave them down below. That way, if you think there's anything that I missed, you can kind of go ahead, say your piece with that helpful tip or trick in the comment section below. With that being said, guys, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like, share, and comment down below your thoughts on how this series went as a whole. If you guys want me to do more of these, or if you guys think that I should be have some more topics for this series, you can go ahead and leave it down in the comments section below. Hopefully, we'll see where that goes. But if you haven't already done so, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Help share about the channel. Help us clicking that subscribe button. No extra cost to you. And that being said, guys, that's going to do it for me for now. So, until next time, stay gaming.